equitable distribution for opportunities for advancement in all aspects of societal life. Headline: the mission and vision of the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, who aim to increase awareness so the blind, deafblind, and partially sighted can have equal access to the benefits and opportunities society has to offer. It's within that spirit I extended an invitation to Ian White, the president of the Canadian Council of the Blind Toronto Visionaries, and Christine Zannier, the project lead for the International Day for Persons with Disabilities Conference on behalf of the Alliance's Toronto chapter, to join me in conversation about the significance of the day and moving the needle of progress forward as we work as a collective unit to establish equality, equity, and inclusion for all. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Absolutely. So if you are both ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm excited to talk to you this morning about the International Day of Persons with Disabilities and the Alliance for Blind Canadians Toronto chapter. Great to see both of you this morning, and thank you so very much for being here.
Thanks very much for having us.
Absolutely. Now, I just wanted to start our conversation by asking you both generally, what does the International Day for Persons with Disabilities mean to both of you?
Well, I'll start. It's a really important day. If we look at the UN, the International Day for People with Disabilities, it's an annual event, and it's about increasing awareness and to celebrate people with disabilities.
And I think as
especially those in the marginal areas, and we don't want to leave people behind. So it's really about removing barriers that people with disability are experiencing and forging towards having equality for all.
Yeah, Ian, I would be curious to know if you had any remarks on the significance of the day as well.
I think just picking up on what Christine has been saying, the UN Convention on Persons with Disabilities essentially asserts that people with disabilities have a series of recognizable human rights, and those rights are often misunderstood or ignored in the general context of societies. And I think that what the day means to me is that it's an opportunity for us to just take a moment, take a breath, and really think hard about issues like inclusion and universal design, and making sure that, as Christine said, people with disabilities aren't left behind.
Absolutely, and more specifically for folks that are for blind Canadians, what sort of awareness do you think this day provides them an opportunity to sort of bring to the forefront?
So there are a number of things that sort of spring to mind when you pose that question. The first thing I think is that a lot of people in Canada are not aware of the impact of eye health or the threat to eye health that exists. There was a recent study done by the Canadian Council of the Blind, and it essentially indicates that about 20% of the Canadian population is currently living with a disease or an illness or a medical condition that threatens eye health. And what that means is it threatens vision. So if you think about the general Canadian population of about 37 million people, about 8 million of them are currently living in that condition with the potential for vision loss. And even if we scale it back to about the 3% of the Canadian population that's actually living with vision loss right now, the cost to the Canadian society in real dollars is immense. It ranks in the tens of billions of dollars annually in lost productivity, in loss of well-being, in loss of tax revenue. The list just goes on, in direct medical expenses. And so the overall impact of vision loss on Canadian society is actually really large. And a lot of people don't really understand that because we are only 3% of the population. We don't have a lot of presence in sort of general consciousness in society. And I think that's where we really need to do some work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to also know about the good work of the Alliance for Blind Canadians and the work that you do to help blind Canadians to live a more full and complete life.
The Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians advocates for the blind, for the partial sighted, and for the deafblind community. So the Alliance is a nonprofit organization with 200 members strong, where the Toronto chapter is one of the chapters. So there is a chapter in the Ottawa-Gatineau area, and there's a chapter in Halifax, and there's also an affiliate now in BC, which was a group of chapters that have come together under one umbrella. And the Alliance is really committed to increasing the awareness of our human rights, just what Ian was talking about, to ensure that we have equality, to participate in all aspects of society. So it's really about leveling the playing field. And since 1992, the Alliance has participated in working groups and committees at the national level, the provincial and municipal levels of government. And the Alliance advocates for the accessibility, the equality, and the elimination of barriers in how organizations and businesses deliver products and services and programs across Canada. So definitely a very, a small and mighty group. And in terms of priorities, we actually provide trainings and workshops for employers to increase employment opportunities. And we work with the CHRC and the CRTC. So we look at transportation, we look at impact on consumers, we look at customer service. We're looking at self-service kiosks. We're also looking at the assistive devices program, which Ian can shed more light on. So multiple programs and services offer mentorships for our members. There is scholarship opportunities for those going to university. We award scholarships on an annual basis. We also have an annual conference. And it's really a collective, collaborative group of people working together in a volunteer capacity to really make life more equal and to, as I said, break those barriers for people who are blind, partially sighted, and deafblind.
Yeah, absolutely. And Christine and Ian, as you both know, that I feel very strongly about inclusion being a gateway to independence. And Christine, you brought up employment, inclusive employment for blind Canadians. And, you know, I think when you give someone a job with a disability, you're not only giving them a paycheck, you're giving them a sense of belonging. So I'm curious if we can dive into a little bit more of how important it is to give blind Canadians equal access to gainful employment.
Well, if we look at what the Toronto chapter did, is we put together a program called the Inclusive Employment Advocacy Project. And one of the pieces was really to work with employers and community organizations to help them understand the value of hiring people with disabilities. It's known as the Disability Advantage Training Program. And we worked with employers like the YMCA, we worked with March of Dimes, we worked with a global law firm, Baker McKenzie, to really establish and talk about disability inclusion and really understand what their hiring processes were, their recruitment processes, the training that they're providing their managers, and really making a difference. And I have to say, Baker McKenzie specifically came out and said, you know, we didn't know where to find people with disabilities, but now we're asking the right questions, especially around providing accommodations or providing support during the interview process and onboarding people with disabilities. So they trained up their managers.
Yeah, absolutely. Continuing the conversation is always important, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And just more broadly, either one of you can answer this question. I'm curious to ask you about the importance of continuing the dialogue in terms of making progress towards a more equitable future for blind Canadians. How important do you think that is?
From my perspective, it's absolutely vital. You know, being a relatively small proportion of the population, there is a great deal of lack of knowledge and lack of understanding in the general population about the lived experience of people with vision loss. And I think because of that, there's a tendency to stereotype. There's a tendency to assume that people with disabilities, and specifically people with vision loss, just can't do things. I've found in my experience living and working with people in the vision loss community that it is absolutely full of people with rich potential. And in many cases, that potential is realized simply because of the drive and energy of the individuals who want to pursue their own goals. It's surprising when I talk to people, whether they're sighted or not, excuse me, about some of the accomplishments that people with vision loss have achieved in their lives. And I think that the more we have those conversations, the closer we will get to breaking the stereotypes of people with disabilities as people who can't. I think continuing the conversation, bringing the conversation to the forefront is really what matters. The more we can talk, the more we can have those conversations, the more we will spread understanding and create opportunities for people with disabilities to be fully included in Canadian society.
Christine, did you have anything to add in that regard?
I totally agree with Ian. It's absolutely vital. And if we think about it, everybody, you know, is aging, right? And as we age, people's eyesight, people's hearing gets less and less. So people may feel that they're not going to be impacted by vision loss in any shape or form. But the reality is, you know, their eyesight is changing, and it's vitally important, to be flourishing and have that equal opportunity in society.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I'm excited to talk about the annual conference, which I'll be participating in this weekend, about bringing awareness to the work that you do, the important work that you do. And I know that I'm specifically going to talk about COVID and the impact of the virus on people with disabilities, but I'm wondering if you can tell me all about the conference that we'll all be participating in this weekend and the importance of it.
I can't believe it's happening this Saturday.
Time
1
flies
o'clock.
when you're having fun, right?
Yes, it's all coming together. The planning actually started back in September. So we brought partner committees together, and Ian, of course, is very much a partner, and Canadian Council of the Blind is a sponsor for the conference. And the goal for this year's conference is really to spread awareness of invisible disabilities. And Kevin, as you said, the impact that the pandemic is having on our mental health. I think it's a really important conversation to have. And the virtual conference is going to be accessible for all. We're going to have Joeda Gupta, who is going to be our co-host. So we're also going to be live on the Accessible Media channel for The Pulse, which is a Saturday afternoon show that Joeda hosts. And she's a CBC radio columnist on disability issues. I don't know if you know Joeda, but she's very well known out in the disability community. And we're going to talk to people with diverse lived experience and really cross disability, and the opportunity to have this conference in a virtual capacity gives the audience an opportunity across Canada. And we also have speakers from across Canada. So I'm really excited about that. And Kevin, you're going to be part of the fireside chat. And it's really going to be very interactive. And what's really important is I want it to be a safe space. I want people to feel comfortable in opening up and sharing their experience as they hear from other folks, other people with disabilities who have, really transformed their lives and made their lives better. We're going to have Melanie Tadeo. She's going to kick it off as our keynote. And she's a real advocate for inclusion because at the age of 21, she actually suffered a massive stroke that left her completely paralyzed on her left-hand side. And she became legally blind. And after years of therapy, she regained her independence. And she's actually the first legally blind teacher to graduate in Ontario.
Well,
and she's written a book. Yeah, My Unforeseen Journey, Losing Sight, Gaining Vision.
Well, yeah, I have to tell you, I'm very much looking forward to being a part of this important conference. And I want to thank both of you publicly for extending an invitation to me. I'm very much looking forward to it. And then, Ian, I'm curious to ask you the second to last question first. Well,
Okay.
what's your greatest hope for the future for blind Canadians across the country?
Wow. Perfect world dream. I have a couple of things actually. One, I think if we can encourage the federal government to carry through on a promise that has been on the legislative agenda since 2003, to actually put in place a comprehensive eye health strategy in Canada. I think that would be a huge step forward, simply because according to Fighting Blindness Canada's statistics, 75% of vision loss is actually preventable with early diagnosis and early treatment. What that basically means is that 3/4 of the people who lose their vision in Canada don't have to. And it all comes down to access to appropriate eye health care. I think that would be one big chunk of the dream, is just that there should be fewer of us. Having said that, I think if we were to move towards a society that truly embraced universal design in all aspects of our lived experience, we would just automatically be included, by virtue of the fact that all of the systems and processes and technologies and devices that we encounter would automatically be designed for everyone to access. And I think if we were to achieve that as a standard, we would be in a position where inclusion would just be automatic, because there wouldn't be any barriers. I mean, in a very perfect world, I think it would be that, you know, when someone with a disability walks into a job interview, the first thing on the interviewer's mind is the candidate's qualifications. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would cut through a lot of red tape and provide more access to opportunity, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, ultimately, my perfect world would be, we would no longer need to advocate for equality, right? I mean, that's the end goal.
Well, of course, but I think advocating is always an ongoing conversation, isn't it?
Absolutely it is, yeah. We don't live in a perfect world, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And Christine, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the same question.
Wow, that's a big, powerful question.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Ian. It's in a perfect world, universal design is so important. And I think what happens is people with disabilities are brought into the conversation too late or after the fact. So something is designed, whether it's a program, a website, and people say, oh, well, you know, I think we should talk to people with disabilities and get their feedback and get their thoughts and their recommendations. And I know a lot of organizations, government, you know, very large corporate entities are really embracing universal design. It's our whole society, right? It has to be a priority. And I think through the pandemic, it's really shone a light on where we really need to focus. And universal design and having accessibility for all really benefits everyone.
I think the key component there, Kev, is that in order to define universal design and to ensure that it actually is universal, we need to be at the table. We need to be talking with the people who are doing the designing in order to make sure that they understand our lived experience and that they understand our needs with respect to access, so that they can truly engage in a process that creates something that is universally accessible. I think it's really important for us to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Representation matters, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does, yeah.
And just finally, I'm wondering if you can share how people can register for this conference and support the Alliance for Blind Canadians Toronto chapter if they're so inclined.
You can register for the conference at Eventbrite. You can find it as Breaking Barriers, Making the Invisible Visible. You can also find it on blindcanadians.ca or on our Facebook page at AEBC.
Fantastic. And I'm just wondering if you had any final words, either one of the two of you, about the importance of including blind Canadians in full society. I'm just curious if you had any final words to share or anything else you wanted to say.
I think one of the things that has struck me about sort of reading about the history of the creation of institutions like the CNIB or the Canadian Council of the Blind, that the thrust has always been about creating opportunities for people with vision loss to realize their potential. And I think that those institutions came into being precisely because that potential was being wasted. It was being squandered and it was being ignored because of the presupposition that blind people just can't do. And I think that one of the things that this conference highlights and the International Day of Persons with Disabilities highlights is that there is an incredible potential resting within people with disabilities and that they have a great deal to offer society. And unless we as a society are willing to embrace that potential, it's just going to remain wasted. So I think we have an obligation to promote this event and promote the rights of people with disabilities, simply because not to do so is just a waste.
Yeah, absolutely. Christine, did you have any final words?
I think Ian really summed it up well. I think it's really important to continue to have that voice and to make that voice stronger and stronger. And the celebration for International Day of Persons with Disabilities is really about sharing voices, sharing concerns, and you know, saying we don't like the way it is. Let's make it better. And I think together as a society, we can do that.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, I want to thank the two of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in conversation about the important work that your organization does, and to help me promote our upcoming conference this week. And I want to thank both of you for the great work that you do and for joining me this morning. It's most appreciated.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Kevin.